I'm Maya, 32 years old, and until today, I was the wife of James Blackwell, heir to the Blackwell real estate fortune. After 5 years of marriage, countless fertility treatments and tears shed over my endometriosis diagnosis, I thought nothing could hurt worse than my inability to give my husband a child. I was wrong. Sitting at this anniversary dinner, my father-in-law, Harold, just handed me a gift box with divorce papers inside, announcing to everyone that since I couldn't provide an heir, they found someone who could. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to follow my journey and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You won't believe what happened next. The first time I met James, I was 26, fresh out of grad school with an art history degree from Boston University. I had landed my dream job as an assistant curator at a small but prestigious gallery in downtown Boston. We were hosting a fundraiser for local artists when James walked in looking slightly out of place in his perfectly tailored suit among the eclectic crowd of artists and collectors. First time at one of these events, I asked, offering him a glass of champagne from my tray. I was helping serve that night since we were short-staffed. He smiled, revealing perfect white teeth that contrasted with his tan skin and dark hair. Is it that obvious? Just a bit. Most of our regular patrons don't wear Armani to a casual fundraiser. His laugh was genuine, not the practiced chuckle I'd heard from other wealthy patrons. Guilty as charged. I'm James Blackwell. My family foundation is considering a donation, so my father suggested I check out the scene. I introduced myself, not realizing I was meeting the son of Harold Blackwell, one of Boston's wealthiest real estate developers. James wasn't what I expected from someone born into such privilege. He was knowledgeable about art, asking thoughtful questions about the exhibits. By the end of the night, he had asked for my number. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, far from the upscale establishments his family frequented. James seemed to enjoy the anonymity, the freedom from expectations. We talked for hours about everything from Renaissance art to our favorite childhood books. Unlike other men I'd dated who grew bored when I discussed art history, James listened attentively, his eyes never leaving my face. The next few months were a whirlwind. James took me to the theatre, to weekend trips to New York City, to visit museums, to poetry readings at small cafes. He seemed different from his family's world, more interested in culture than in building the next skyscraper. The first red flag appeared 3 months in when we were supposed to meet for dinner at a new restaurant. James called to cancel, his voice tight with stress. My father needs me at a business dinner tonight. I can't miss it. No problem, I said, hiding my disappointment. We can reschedule. You're not upset. Why would I be? Family obligations happen. There was a pause before James responded. You're not like the other women I've dated. They always got angry when I had to change plans for my father. That should have been my first clue that Harold Blackwell's influence over his son was unusually strong. But I was falling in love with James, seeing only what I wanted to see. Meeting his family confirmed my suspicions. The Blackwell estate sprawled across 5 acres in the most exclusive neighborhood in Boston. The house itself was a massive colonial structure, intimidating in its perfection. Harold Blackwell met us at the door, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with steel grey hair and piercing blue eyes that evaluated me like a property investment. So you're the gallery girl, he said, extending his hand. Not Maya, or even James's girlfriend. Just my occupation reducing me to my utility. I'm the assistant curator at the Hartwell Gallery. I corrected gently, meeting his firm handshake with equal pressure. Victoria Blackwell appeared behind her husband, slim and elegant in an expensive silk dress, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite it being a casual Sunday lunch. Her smile never reached her eyes as she air-kissed my cheeks. James has told us so little about you, she said, leading us into a formal dining room where staff were setting the table with what appeared to be antique china. Just that you work at that little art place downtown. Throughout lunch, Harold dominated the conversation, discussing business deals and family connections, dropping names of senators and CEOs as casually as most people mention neighbors. Victoria asked pointed questions about my family. And what does your father do, Maya? He was a high school English teacher. He passed away when I was in college. And your mother? She's a nurse at Hartford General. The slight raising of Victoria's eyebrows spoke volumes. I wasn't from their world, and they wanted to make that clear. After dessert, Harold took James aside for what he called a quick business chat, leaving me with Victoria in the sitting room. James is our only child, she said, stirring her tea. Harold built this company from the ground up, and James will inherit everything. The Blackwell name means something in this city. James is very talented, I replied. He has great instincts for business and art. Yes, well, art doesn't build legacy, family does. She set down her cup with a delicate clink. The Blackwell line has continued unbroken for 5 generations. Harold expects James to continue that tradition with the right partner. The message was clear: I might be an interesting diversion for James, but I wasn't right for the Blackwell legacy. James proposed 6 months after we met on a private yacht in Boston Harbor. It seemed spontaneous and romantic until I realized the ring, a massive diamond that felt heavy on my finger, had been his grandmother's. This had been planned, perhaps even with his parents' knowledge. My father thinks we should have a prenuptial agreement, James mentioned a week later, trying to sound casual as we looked at potential wedding venues. Is that what your father thinks, or what you think? I asked. James looked uncomfortable. It's just a formality, Maya. Standard for families with significant assets. It doesn't mean anything. I should have recognized this pattern, how often my father thinks preceded major decisions, but I convinced myself it was normal given the family wealth. I signed the prenup after a lawyer friend reviewed it, noting the clauses about infidelity and children, but assuring me they were standard. Our wedding was held at the Blackwell estate with over 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. They were business associates, political connections, and social acquaintances of the Blackwells. My side was pitifully small in comparison, my mother, a few relatives and friends from college and work. The event felt more like a business merger than a celebration of love with Harold, giving a toast that focused more on the joining of our families than on James and me as individuals. As we prepared to leave for our honeymoon in Italy, Victoria pulled me aside. I expect you'll start a family right away, she said, her voice low. The Blackwell heir should be born within the first year of marriage. That's tradition. I smiled tightly, unwilling to discuss my reproductive plans with this woman I barely knew. James and I will decide that together. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped my arm. Just remember, dear, you married into the Blackwell family. There are expectations that come with that privilege. I pulled away, joining James at the car, trying to shake off the conversation. I loved James. We would build our life together on our terms, not his family's. How naive I was. The first year of marriage had moments of genuine happiness. James and I bought a brownstone in Back Bay, a compromise between his desire for luxury and my preference for character over opulence. We travelled to Italy, France, and Japan, bonding over new experiences and building what I thought was a solid foundation for our life together. James worked at the family company, but made time for us coming home for dinner most nights, planning weekend getaways when work allowed. We talked about starting a family, but agreed to wait until we'd had some time just for us. That changed after our first Christmas as a married couple when Harold cornered James during the family gathering. When are you giving me a grandson? I overheard him demanding. The Blackwell name needs to continue. Your cousin Robert already has 2 boys and he's younger than you. Maya and I are enjoying being married first, Dad, James replied, but I could hear the defensiveness in his voice. Marriage is about legacy, son. Everything I built, everything my father built, it's all for the next generation. Don't waste time. After that, the monthly family dinners became uncomfortable interrogations. Harold would ask if we had news to share, while Victoria would make pointed comments about my age. Women today wait too long, she said during one particularly tense dinner. Fertility drops significantly after 30, you know, and you're what, 28 now? 27, I corrected. And plenty of women have healthy pregnancies well into their 30s and 40s. Victoria smiled tightly. Not in this family. Blackwell women have always had their children young. It's better for the bloodline. Capel. James squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing to contradict his mother. That night in bed, he brought up children again. Maybe we should start trying. He suggested, his hand resting on my stomach. It might take a while anyway, so we could just stop using protection and see what happens. I agreed, partly because I did want children eventually, and partly because I was tired of the pressure from his family. I thought having a baby might actually reduce their interference in our lives, giving James and me a chance to form our own family unit. For the first few months, trying to conceive was exciting. We tracked my cycle-planned romantic evenings around my fertile days and imagined names for our future child. But after 6 months with no pregnancy, the joy began to fade, replaced by a sense of obligation and mounting pressure. Maybe we should see a doctor, James suggested after we received yet another baby announcement from one of his cousins. Just to make sure everything's okay. The first doctor, a fertility specialist recommended by Victoria, spent more time discussing my age and lifestyle than examining me. When I mentioned my occasionally painful periods, he dismissed them as normal. You're just stressed, he told me. Women who focus too much on their careers often have trouble conceiving. Perhaps cut back on your work hours. I switched doctors, finding a female OB/GYN who took my concerns seriously. After several tests, including a painful procedure to examine my uterus and fallopian tubes, she diagnosed me with endometriosis. It's a condition where tissue, similar to the uterine lining, grows outside the uterus, she explained gently. It can cause pain, inflammation, and in some cases, fertility issues. But many women with endometriosis do successfully conceive and carry pregnancies to term. She outlined treatment options from medication to manage the symptoms to surgery to remove the excess tissue. It's not a cure, but it might improve your chances of conception. When I told James about the diagnosis, he was initially supportive, holding me as I cried with the relief of finally having an explanation for the pain I'd experienced for years. We'll figure this out, he promised. Whatever treatment you need, we'll do it. But when we shared the news with his parents, their reaction was very different. Endometriosis, Victoria repeated, her voice sharp with displeasure. Is that hereditary? The cause isn't fully understood, I explained. But the doctor said it shouldn't prevent us from having children eventually. We just might need some help. Harold set down his fork with a clatter. What kind of help and how long will it take? The doctor suggested medication first, possibly surgery if that doesn't help. As for time, there's no way to know for sure. That's unacceptable, Harold declared. The Blackwell line cannot be left to chance. James, I want you to consult with Dr. Friedman. He's handled fertility issues for several of our friends. Very discreet, very effective. Dr. Friedman turned out to be an aggressive fertility specialist who suggested immediate in vitro fertilization, bypassing less invasive treatments. When I expressed concern about jumping straight to IVF, he looked at me over his glasses with barely concealed impatience. Mrs. Blackwell, at your age with endometriosis, you don't have the luxury of time. I'm 28, I reminded him, and my regular doctor suggested trying medication first. If you're serious about giving your husband a child, you'll follow my recommendation. I left his office in tears, furious at his dismissive attitude. James, however, was swayed by the specialist's confidence. Maybe Dad's right, he said as we drove home. Maybe we should be more aggressive. Dr. Friedman has a great success rate. He didn't even examine me, James. He just looked at my chart for 5 minutes and decided IVF was the only option. That's not good medicine. But if it works, does it matter? We both want a baby. That was the beginning of the shift in our marriage. Every month that passed without a pregnancy widened the gap between us. James began spending more time at work, often missing the appointments with my regular doctor. Harold offered to pay for the expensive fertility treatments, but his generosity came with constant updates on their investment. Any news yet? Became his standard greeting, no longer bothering with pleasantries. Meanwhile, my career was flourishing. I was promoted to full curator, responsible for discovering new artists and organizing exhibitions. My first major show received excellent reviews, bringing significant attention to the gallery. But instead of celebrating my success, James seemed almost resentful. Maybe you should take a break from work, he suggested one night. Dr. Friedman said stress can impact fertility. My job isn't what's causing our fertility issues, James, and it's important to me. More important than having a family. The question hung between us, revealing the growing divide in our priorities. I wanted children, but not at the cost of my identity. James, increasingly under his father's influence, seemed to view my career as an impediment to his family's expectations. As the pressure mounted, strange things began happening. My fertility medication went missing, only to reappear in different locations. Appointments were mysteriously cancelled. Once I found my temperature tracking app had been deleted from my phone. When I began to suspect someone was tampering with my medication, I set a trap marking the pills with a tiny dot of food colouring. A week later, I discovered they had been replaced with similar-looking but unmarked pills. When I confronted James, he dismissed my concerns. You think my mother is switching your pills? Do you hear how paranoid that sounds? Then explain how my marked pills disappeared and these unmarked ones appeared in their place. You're under a lot of pressure. Maybe you forgot marking them, or maybe the mark wore off. It was the first time James had openly gaslighted me, making me question my own sanity rather than consider his mother might be interfering. That night, I called my college roommate and best friend Lauren, who had become a corporate lawyer in Boston. Something's not right, Lauren. I feel like I'm losing my mind. You're not crazy, Maya. From everything you've told me, your in-laws are trying to control every aspect of your life. Have you considered what you want to do about your marriage? I hadn't, not really. Despite the problems, I still loved James, still believed we could work through this if we could just escape his parents' influence. But that was becoming increasingly difficult as James spent more time at the family company, more evenings in his father's study discussing business, returning home with new arguments about my career, my treatment options, our future. I didn't know it then, but the foundation of my marriage was already crumbling beneath me, and the worst betrayals were yet to come. The first sign that James might be unfaithful came in the form of a text message that appeared on his phone while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, but the notification flashed on his screen as I walked past. Can't wait to see you today. Same time, same place. When I asked him about it, he dismissed it as a message from a business colleague about a regular meeting. It sounded reasonable, but something in his too casual tone made me uneasy. Then came the late nights at the office, the sudden business trips with vague itineraries, the unexplained charges at restaurants we had never visited together. You should surprise him for lunch one day, Lauren suggested when I shared my concerns. See if he's actually at the office when he says he is. I resisted the idea at first, telling myself I trusted my husband. But after finding a long blonde hair on his suit jacket and smelling unfamiliar perfume, I decided to follow Lauren's advice. The receptionist at Blackwell Properties seemed surprised when I asked for James. Mr. Blackwell is at lunch, Mrs. Blackwell. Would you like me to tell him you stopped by when he returns? No need, I said, my heart pounding. Where does he usually go for lunch? I thought I might surprise him. She hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I'm not sure today. Sometimes he goes to Lucia's on Newbury Street. I thanked her and left, heading straight to Lucia's, an upscale Italian restaurant a few blocks away. Through the large front windows, I spotted James immediately sitting at a corner table with a young woman. She was beautiful with long blonde hair and delicate features. As I watched, James reached across the table to take her hand, his face animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. I didn't confront him then. I stood outside the restaurant, frozen, as the reality of my situation crashed over me. This wasn't a business lunch. The way they leaned toward each other, the intimate touches, the complicity in their smiles, all spoke of a relationship that went beyond professional boundaries. That night, I checked our joint bank accounts and discovered several large transfers to a holding company I didn't recognize. Nearly $50,000 had moved through this account in the past 3 months. When I asked James about the transfers, he became defensive. It's for a potential investment. Why are you monitoring my spending? It's our joint account, James. That's our money, not just yours. My family's money, you mean? He snapped, revealing the ugly truth that had always lurked beneath the surface of our marriage. I earn it, my family built the company. You just spend it on your little art projects. The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. Despite the prenup, we had always talked about our finances as shared, our futures intertwined. Now James was drawing clear lines of ownership and power. After that argument, I knew I needed to protect myself. I reached out to Lauren again, this time with a specific request. I need a good private investigator, someone discreet. Lauren didn't ask questions, simply provided a name and number. Michael is the best. He's expensive but thorough, and he's worked with my firm on several cases, so I trust him. Michael Thompson was a former police detective who now specialized in marital investigations. He was matter-of-fact about the process, explaining how he would track James's movements, document any meetings, and provide photographic evidence if necessary. Most clients want to know for sure before they make any decisions, he said. Suspicion is one thing, proof is another. For 2 weeks, Michael followed James, documenting his movements and taking photographs. The evidence he eventually presented confirmed my worst fears. James was having an affair with Natalie Graham, the 25-year-old daughter of one of Harold's business partners. They met 3 times a week at a luxury apartment James had rented under the holding company's name. The apartment was leased 6 months ago, Michael told me. Based on the doorman's information, Mr. Blackwell has been visiting regularly since then. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of fertility treatments, of pretending we were trying to build a family together while he was building a separate life with another woman. When I confronted James with the evidence, his reaction surprised me. Instead of denial or even guilt, he seemed almost relieved. I was going to tell you, he said, not meeting my eyes. It just happened. Natalie understands the pressures I'm under with the business, with the family expectations. The expectation to cheat on your wife. He flinched. That's not fair. We've been trying for a baby for over 2 years, Maya. 2 years of doctors and treatments and disappointment. So this is my fault, because I couldn't get pregnant fast enough for your father's timeline. I didn't say that, but you have to understand there's a lot at stake here. The business, the family name. What about our marriage vows? What about the stake I have in this relationship that I've invested 3 years of my life in? James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I once found endearing. It's complicated. Natalie's father is a key investor in our new development project. The families have known each other for generations. Her mother and mine are already planning. He stopped abruptly, but it was too late. The implication was clear. Planning what James A. wedding? Are you planning to divorce me and marry her? No one's planning anything yet. He backpedaled. Dad just thinks it might be a good solution for everyone if we explored other options. Other options, I repeated flatly. You mean replacing me with a more fertile model who comes with business connections? That's a cruel way to put it. Is there a kind way to describe cheating on your wife and plotting to replace her? The conversation deteriorated from there, with James alternating between defensive justifications and hollow apologies. He claimed to still care for me, but insisted I needed to be realistic about our situation. When I asked if he would end the affair, he couldn't give me a straight answer. That night, sleeping in separate rooms, I made a discovery that would change everything. Unable to sleep, I went to James's home office to look for our insurance documents, thinking I should check what coverage I had independently of James's family plan. In the back of his filing cabinet behind tax records, I found a folder labelled GDI Holdings, the same name as the holding company that had received the bank transfers. Inside were not just records of the apartment rental, but copies of emails between Harold James and Graham Development Inc. They detailed a complex financial arrangement involving offshore accounts, shell companies, and what appeared to be systematic tax fraud and embezzlement from investor funds. The most recent document was a draft agreement transferring ownership of several Blackwell properties to these shell companies for well below market value, presumably to hide assets. I took pictures of everything with my phone, my hands shaking. This went beyond marital infidelity into potentially criminal territory. The next morning, I forwarded the images to Lauren without explanation, then deleted them from my device in case James checked my phone. She called me immediately. Maya, where did you get these documents? James's office. Why? What are they? I'm not sure yet, but they look like evidence of some serious financial misconduct. Maya, this is big, like federal investigation big. I need to show these to a colleague who specializes in financial crimes. Do what you need to do, I told her, a strange calm settling over me. But don't tell me the details yet, I need to think. Before I could decide what to do with this information, James informed me that his parents were hosting a special dinner for our upcoming 5th anniversary. The formal invitation arrived a few days later, heavy cream cardstock, embossed with the Blackwell family crest. The wording was oddly formal for a family dinner, more like a business function than a celebration of marriage. Lauren was suspicious when I showed her the invitation. This feels staged, Maya. Why the sudden desire to celebrate your anniversary when they've been trying to undermine your marriage? Maybe they feel guilty, or maybe James told them to back off. Or maybe they're planning something. Lauren frowned. I'm coming with you. It says family only. Add me as your +1. If James objects, that tells you something right there. To my surprise, when I told James I was bringing Lauren, he agreed without hesitation. That's fine. Mom's invited some family friends too. As the dinner approached, James's behavior shifted. He became attentive again, bringing home flowers, asking about my day, almost like the early days of our relationship. But there was a forced quality to his affection, as if he was following a script rather than expressing genuine feeling. The night before the dinner, I found him in his office on the phone, speaking in low tones. Everything's arranged for tomorrow. Yes, the papers will be ready. No, I don't think she suspects anything. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. Maya, I didn't hear you come in. Who were you talking to? Dad, just finalizing some details for tomorrow. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's going to be a special night. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. I texted Lauren as soon as I was alone. Something's definitely happening tomorrow. Be prepared. Her response was immediate. I already am, and so are some friends of mine. Trust me. I didn't know what she meant, but Lauren had never let me down. Whatever the Blackwells had planned, I wouldn't face it alone. The Blackwell mansion was lit up like a Christmas display when we arrived for the anniversary dinner, every window glowing with warm light that contrasted sharply with the cold reception inside. Victoria met us at the door, air-kissing my cheeks without making contact, her eyes flicking dismissively over Lauren. James didn't mention you were bringing a guest, she said, though James had assured me he'd told them. Lauren is practically family. I replied, squeezing my friend's arm gratefully. The grand dining room had been transformed for the occasion, with elaborate flower arrangements and fine china set for what appeared to be at least 20 people. I recognized some of the guests as business associates of Harold's, along with a few family members I'd met at our wedding. Everyone seemed to be watching us with an uncomfortable mixture of curiosity and pity. "Quite a turnout for an anniversary dinner," Lauren murmured as we accepted champagne from a server. "The Blackwells don't do anything small," I whispered back. Harold approached, commanding the room as always, in a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He clasped my shoulder in what might have appeared to others as an affectionate gesture, but his fingers dug in painfully. "Maya, so glad you could make it to your own anniversary celebration," he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. The phrasing was odd, as if my attendance had been uncertain. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, matching his public smile while disengaging from his grip. 5 years is an important milestone. Harold's smile tightened. "Yes, indeed. A time for reflection and looking forward." James appeared at my side, his face slightly flushed. He'd already been drinking, I realized, noting the slight glassiness in his eyes. "Dad, Mum wants you to say hello to the Pinkneys. They just arrived." As Harold moved away, I turned to James. "What's really going on tonight? This doesn't feel like an anniversary celebration." "Of course it is," he said too quickly. What else would it be? Before I could press further, Victoria rang a small silver bell signaling guests to take their seats for dinner. I found myself separated from Lauren, seated between James and an elderly aunt I'd met only once before. Lauren was placed at the far end of the table, though she caught my eye and gave me a reassuring nod. Across from me sat a young woman I didn't recognize, who kept her eyes down throughout the first course. It took me several minutes to realize it was Natalie James's mistress. Her blonde hair pulled back in a conservative style that didn't match the photos the investigator had shown me. My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral, years of navigating Blackwell family politics having taught me the value of a composed facade. The dinner proceeded with excruciating slowness through multiple courses. Conversation around me felt stilted, with odd pauses whenever I joined in. James drank steadily, growing more withdrawn with each glass of wine. By the time dessert was served, an elaborate cake decorated with 5 years in golden frosting, the tension in the room was palpable. Harold stood as the cake was being cut, tapping his glass for attention. "Before we enjoy this lovely dessert, I'd like to make a toast to James and Maya on this significant occasion." The guests quieted all eyes on Harold as he raised his glass. Marriage is a sacred institution, one that carries forward our most important traditions and legacies. 5 years ago, James chose Maya to join our family to continue the Blackwell name into the next generation. He paused, his gaze finding me with cold precision. Unfortunately, not all unions fulfill their purpose. Sometimes we must acknowledge when a partnership has failed to bear fruit and make difficult decisions for the good of the family's future. Murmurs rippled through the guests. James stared fixedly at his plate, while Victoria's thin smile held triumphant malice. In recognition of this anniversary, Harold continued, retrieving a small box from his jacket pocket. "I have a special gift for Maya." He walked around the table, placing the box in front of me with deliberate ceremony. It was wrapped in silver paper, with a black ribbon about the size of a jewelry box. The room had gone completely silent. "Since you couldn't provide us with an heir here, take this anniversary gift," Harold declared smugly, loud enough for every guest to hear. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a black velvet box, similar to the one James's grandmother's ring had come in. But when I opened it, instead of jewelry, I found legal papers carefully folded to fit the small space. I didn't need to unfold them to know what they were. Divorce papers already filled out with James's signature on the marked lines. 5 years of marriage reduced to a public humiliation orchestrated by my father-in-law. I looked toward James, hoping against hope that this was some cruel joke he would put a stop to. But he turned his face away, unable to meet my gaze, confirming his complicity in this charade. Victoria chose that moment to stand, placing her hand on Natalie's shoulder. "We'd also like to introduce Natalie Graham, who will be joining our family. She and James are expecting a child together in the spring." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not just an affair, but a pregnancy. Months of fertility treatments of hope and disappointment and blame, while James had already succeeded in creating a child with someone else. Natalie finally looked up, her expression a complex mixture of triumph and discomfort. At least she had the decency to appear somewhat ashamed of her role in this tableau. The room erupted in awkward murmurs and gasps. Some guests looked genuinely shocked. Others seemed unsurprised, suggesting this drama had been previewed for select audiences before tonight's performance. Harold placed a pen beside the box. The papers are straightforward. The terms align with the prenuptial agreement with some additional considerations given the circumstances. Our lawyer is here to notarize everything. No need to prolong the inevitable. I felt Lauren's presence before I saw her suddenly standing behind my chair, her hand a steady pressure on my shoulder. Perhaps Maya should have her own lawyer review the documents first, she suggested, her professional voice cutting through the tension. That won't be necessary, Harold dismissed her. Everything is standard. Maya knows what she signed up for. In that moment, looking at the eager anticipation on Harold's face, the smug satisfaction on Victoria's, and the cowardly avoidance in James's something crystallized within me. This family had spent years trying to break me, to mold me into their vision, or discard me if I failed. They expected tears pleading a scene that would confirm their narrative of my unworthiness. I would give them none of it. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I took the pen, unfolded the papers, and began to read. The terms were indeed brutal, stripping me of any financial claim, requiring me to vacate our home, within 30 days imposing a gag order about the Blackwell family. Harold shifted impatiently as I read each page, clearly having expected me to sign blindly in my emotional state. When I finished reading, I looked up at him with a steady gaze. These terms seem designed to punish me for a medical condition beyond my control. They reflect the reality of your failure to fulfill your primary role in this marriage, he replied coldly. I nodded, accepting the blow without flinching. I see. Then I signed my signature, flowing across each marked line with surprising steadiness. The room seemed to collectively exhale, the tension shifting as the assembled guests processed my unexpected composure. Harold reached for the papers with undisguised eagerness, but before he could take them, Lauren spoke again. Since we're exchanging legal documents tonight, she said, her voice carrying easily across the stunned room, I have something that might interest you as well, Mr. Blackwell. She opened her purse and removed a cream-coloured envelope, sliding it across the table, with the same ceremonial deliberation Harold had used with the divorce papers. What's this? Harold demanded, not touching the envelope. Information that came to light during our preparation for tonight's events, Lauren replied professionally. I thought it only fair you should have it given your family's dedication to transparency. Something in her tone must have alarmed him, because Harold's face lost its triumphant expression. He opened the envelope with far less ceremony than he'd shown with his own gift, pulling out several printed pages. As he read, the colour drained from his face, his confident posture collapsing inward. James, noticing his father's reaction, half rose from his seat. Dad, what is it? Harold didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the documents, fingers gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled at the edges. A man I hadn't paid much attention to earlier stood up from his seat near Lauren. Harold Blackwell, I'm Special Agent Thomas Wilson with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Those documents detail the evidence we've gathered regarding systematic fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement within Blackwell Properties and its associated shell companies. The room erupted into chaos. Victoria gasped, her hand flying to her throat. James turned ashen, his gaze darting between his father and the FBI agent. This is absurd, Harold blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. These documents prove nothing. They're fabricated. They're copies of documents found in your company files and private correspondence, Agent Wilson replied calmly. We have the originals along with testimony from several of your business associates who've agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. I watched in stunned silence as the carefully constructed Blackwell facade crumbled. Harold attempted to shove the papers into his pocket, but another agent stepped forward to intercept them. Those are evidence, Mr. Blackwell, and I should inform you that we have a warrant to search both your home and business premises, which is being executed as we speak. James turned to me, panic replacing his earlier shame. Maya, did you know about this? Did you do this? Before I could answer, Harold lunged across the table, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bitch, after everything we gave you. 2 agents restrained him before he could reach me, the fine china crashing to the floor in his struggle. Harold Blackwell, you're under arrest for securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Agent Wilson announced, nodding to his colleagues to escort Harold from the room. James stood frozen, watching his father being handcuffed, and read his rights. This is a mistake, he kept saying. There must be some misunderstanding. Victoria's shock had transformed to fury. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You planned this. You set us up." I shook my head. "I didn't plan anything, Victoria. I simply discovered the truth and shared it with someone who understood its significance." "James had nothing to do with this," she insisted, turning to the FBI agents. "My son wasn't involved in his father's business decisions." Lauren stepped forward. "Actually, Mrs. Blackwell, the evidence clearly shows James's knowledge and participation in the scheme. His signature appears on multiple fraudulent documents, and he personally established several of the shell companies used to hide assets." James seemed to collapse in on himself, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his denial. He turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "Maya, please. You know I was just following Dad's instructions. I never meant to break any laws." For the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of genuine emotion break through my protective numbness pity. James had always been a prisoner of his father's expectations, too weak to forge his own path. Now that weakness had led him to criminal liability. "I can't help you, James," I said quietly. "You made your choices, now you'll have to face the consequences." As the agents approached James, Natalie suddenly stood, her hands protectively covering her stomach. "What about me? What about our baby?" Her question hung in the air, unanswerable in the chaos of the moment. Victoria moved to her side, putting an arm around the younger woman's shoulders in a maternal gesture she had never extended to me. "Don't worry, dear," she said loud enough for me to hear. "We'll take care of you and the baby no matter what happens." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being told I wasn't worthy of the Blackwell name, because I couldn't produce an heir, I was watching Victoria instantly adopt Natalie into the fold, even as her husband and son faced criminal charges that would likely destroy the family legacy far more thoroughly than my infertility ever could. As the agents led James away, following his father, he looked back once more. "I did love you, Maya. In the beginning, it was probably the most honest thing he'd said to me in years." "I know," I replied. "That's what makes this so sad." The dinner guests began to disperse in shocked clusters. The anniversary celebration transformed into something that would fuel Boston society gossip for months to come. I stood in the chaos, the signed divorce papers still on the table in front of me, feeling strangely light, as if a weight I had carried for years had finally been lifted. Lauren put her arm around me. "Let's go home." As we walked out of the Blackwell mansion, likely for the last time, I didn't look back. Whatever happened next, I knew I was finally free of the gilded cage I had mistaken for a home. In the aftermath of what Boston socialites quickly dubbed the Blackwell implosion, I moved into Lauren's spare bedroom while I figured out my next steps. The brownstone James and I had shared was technically owned by a Blackwell family trust and would likely be seized as part of the federal investigation, along with most of their assets. The first few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, interviews with federal investigators, and sleepless nights processing everything that had happened. The divorce became the least complicated aspect of my legal situation, finalized quickly given James's more pressing concerns about his criminal charges. The good news, Lauren told me over coffee one morning, is that the investigators don't believe you had any knowledge of or involvement in the financial crimes. You're considered a witness, not a suspect. And the bad news, I asked, having learned there was always a flip side. The Blackwell assets are frozen during the investigation, including accounts you had joint access to, and the prenup you signed limits what you can claim from the marriage. I sighed, staring into my coffee cup. So I'm basically starting over from zero at 32. Lauren reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Not zero. You have your career, your talent, your freedom, and you have me. She was right. Despite everything, I still had my position at the gallery, though I'd taken a leave of absence to deal with the legal aftermath. And I had friends who had stood by me, who hadn't been fooled by the Blackwell facade or distanced themselves when the scandal broke. The media coverage was intense at first. The fall of one of Boston's most prominent families made headlines across the financial press, with sidebar stories about the shocking anniversary dinner reveal, and occasionally sympathetic profiles of me as the betrayed wife caught in the crossfire. I declined all interview requests, letting the court documents tell whatever story the public needed to hear. Victoria attempted to contact me several times, her messages evolving from threats to desperate pleas for me to tell the authorities James was innocent. I forwarded everything to Lauren without response. Natalie reached out once through a handwritten letter that arrived at the gallery. "I never knew about their financial crimes," she wrote, "and I didn't know James was actively trying for a baby with you when our relationship began. He told me you had separated privately and were only maintaining appearances. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I thought you should know I wasn't part of their plan to humiliate you. That night was as shocking to me as it was to you. I wasn't sure I believed her completely, but the letter suggested she too had been manipulated by the Blackwell family's machinations. I kept the letter but didn't respond. Whatever relationship she and James might salvage after his legal troubles were resolved was no longer my concern. 3 months after the arrest, Harold and James both accepted plea deals, admitting to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with the broader investigation into their business partners. Harold received an 8-year sentence, while James, positioned by his lawyers as having acted under his father's influence, got 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3. Victoria avoided criminal charges but was left with only a fraction of their former wealth, most of their assets seized or frozen pending civil cases from defrauded investors. She sold the mansion and moved to a still luxurious but significantly smaller condo in Back Bay, where she reportedly lived with Natalie, preparing for the arrival of the Blackwell heir, who would now be born while his father served time in a minimum security prison. As for me, 6 months after that fateful dinner, I was ready for a fresh start. With my portion of the divorce settlement modest as it was, given the prenup and asset seizures, I found a small commercial space with an apartment above it in Boston's South End. The neighborhood was up and coming with a vibrant art scene and diverse community far removed from the rarefied world of Beacon Hill and Back Bay. "What exactly are you planning to do with this space?" Lauren asked, as we stood in the empty storefront, sunlight streaming through the large windows onto hardwood floors that needed refinishing. "I'm going to open my own gallery." I said, the idea that had been forming for months finally taking concrete shape. "Something small but specialized, focusing on artists whose work explores healing and transformation." Lauren smiled. "Appropriate." "I thought so. Art helped me process everything that happened. Maybe it can do the same for others." The renovation took 2 months of intensive work, much of it done by friends who volunteered weekends to help paint walls, install lighting, and build display panels. The apartment upstairs was small but full of character, with exposed brick walls and a tiny balcony overlooking a courtyard garden shared by the neighbouring buildings. On the evening before the gallery's soft opening, I stood in the completed space, hardly able to believe how far I'd come from that humiliating night at the Blackwell mansion. The walls were hung with carefully selected works from emerging artists, each piece chosen for its exploration of resilience, renewal, and growth after trauma. "It's beautiful, Maya," Lauren said, joining me after helping to arrange the refreshments for tomorrow's event. "You've created something amazing here." "We created it," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." We had become even closer through the ordeal, Lauren's unwavering support carrying me through the darkest moments of the past year. She had recently been made partner at her law firm, her work on financial crimes, bringing her professional recognition even as it had helped secure justice in my personal life. "Have you decided on a name for the gallery yet?" she asked. I nodded, pointing to the simple sign I'd had made for the front window, Phoenix Gallery. "Rising from the ashes." Lauren smiled. "Perfect." The gallery opening the next day exceeded my expectations, with a steady stream of visitors from the neighbourhood arts community and even a few former clients from my previous position who had sought me out specifically. Several pieces sold enough to cover the next month's expenses, which felt like a promising start. As the event wound down, Lauren approached with a man I didn't recognise, tall with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Maya, this is Dr. Daniel Chen. He runs the art therapy program at Boston Children's Hospital. I thought you two might have some interesting things to talk about." Daniel extended his hand. "Lauren mentioned your focus on art that promotes healing. We've been looking for local galleries to partner with for exhibitions of our patients' work." We spent the next hour discussing possibilities for collaboration, his passion for therapeutic arts matching my own interest in art's transformative potential. By the time he left, we had plans for coffee the following week to continue the conversation, and I found myself looking forward to it with an unexpected flutter of anticipation. "He seems nice," Lauren observed casually after he'd gone. "He does," I agreed, not rising to her obvious matchmaking bait. "And single," she added with mock innocence. I laughed. "I'm not ready for that, Lauren." "I know, just planting seeds for when you are." 1 year to the day after the anniversary dinner that had ended my marriage but begun my liberation, I received a letter from James. It had been forwarded through his lawyer, as I had never provided him with my new address. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. Inside was a brief handwritten note. Maya, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret the way I treated you. Prison has given me time to think about who I became under my father's influence, and I don't like that person. I'm trying to change. The baby is a boy. Victoria named him Harold against my wishes. I hope someday to be a better father than mine was if I ever get the chance. I hope you found happiness. You deserved better than what I gave you. James. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. There was no anger left, just a distant sadness for what might have been if James had found the strength to be his own man earlier. That evening, I hosted a special exhibition at the gallery featuring artwork created by survivors of domestic abuse, part of a fundraiser for a local women's shelter. The event was well attended, the atmosphere warm and supportive, as artists shared their stories of healing through creative expression. Daniel attended, having become a regular presence at gallery events and in my life over the past few months. Our professional collaboration had evolved into friendship, and lately something with the potential for more, though we were taking things slowly. As the last guest departed, Daniel helped me begin closing up. Successful night, he observed, gathering empty wine glasses. You should be proud. It feels good, I admitted, creating a space where art can help people heal. You've healed too, he noted. I wish I'd known you a year ago to see the difference. You wouldn't have liked me then, I said. I was lost trying to fit myself into someone else's idea of who I should be. And now, I looked around at the gallery I had built, at the life I had reclaimed. Now I know exactly who I am, and I like her. Daniel smiled, the warmth in his eyes suggesting he liked her too. Later, standing on my small balcony watching the city lights, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The Blackwell family had tried to break me, to make me believe my worth depended on my ability to produce an heir for their dynasty. Instead, they had inadvertently set me free to create something uniquely mine. Their empire had crumbled under the weight of their own greed and deception, while I had built something new from the ruins of what they took from me. Not a dynasty or a legacy in the way Harold Blackwell had defined it, but a space for healing, for transformation, for genuine human connection through art. There was poetry in that, a justice more profound than any court could provide. And as I looked toward the future, I felt not bitterness or regret, but a quiet gratitude for the painful path that had led me to this unexpected place of peace and possibility. If you've ever had to start over after betrayal, I hope my story gives you courage. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' expectations or how they treat you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a relationship ended? What helped you find strength? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes what seems like an ending is actually the beginning of something beautiful.